All right. Hello, everybody. It is Wednesday, December 10th, 2025, and this is a special emergency episode of the Monday Report. I'm your host, H. James K., and breaking news as of about 2 hours ago, Michigan head coach Sherrone has been let go with cause by the athletic department. The athletic director, Ward Manuel, released a statement that as follows, quote, "Following a university investigation, credible evidence was found that Coach Moore engaged in an inappropriate relationship with a staff member. This conduct constitutes a clear violation of university policy, and U of M maintains zero tolerance for such behavior." End quote. Biff Poggi, who is the assistant head coach, has been placed in charge as the interim head coach as the University of Michigan's football team heads into bowl prep ahead of the Citrus Bowl against Texas. So, this rumor first popped up shortly after the Oklahoma game. The rumor was he had an inappropriate relationship with a staffer, and that there was an investigation and things were going to happen and Sherrone Moore was going to get fired. And, well, Michigan fans only seeing this coming from Michigan State people and Ohio State fans just discarded it. And then it came back after the USC loss. And once again, it was discarded. And then it came back through Michigan State insider or personality Justin Spiro after the Ohio State game. And it once again got kind of denied, like Michigan insiders Isaiah Hole and Sam Webb, they denied it. You know, it really, like the Michigan Wolverines subreddit was banning people for even talking about these rumors. And then a week later, Sherrone Moore is gone. Yeah. So, what do we know? Nothing. We know nothing. We know allegations, and the allegations are, and these are rumors. We have no credible evidence. I'm just telling you what is rumored to have happened. So I'm not libeling anybody, but the rumors that I've been hearing are that he got a staffer pregnant. A college-age athletic department staffer that works with the football team. So think someone from the training staff, graduate assistants, that, younger female got her pregnant. Those are rumors. So I don't want anyone suing me for libel. Those are just rumors. But that's what I've heard. Now, it's still early going. It is still early going. We don't know anything concrete other than the fact that Sherrone Moore has been let go with cause, meaning he doesn't get any of his buyout. Michigan doesn't owe him any more money. It's over. He's done. So, where does that leave Michigan? Well, Biff Poggi is the interim head coach. He's a real character, locker room guy. So his job is to keep the roster together and keep the locker room intact during bowl prep as a well-liked coach is now out the door. Michigan, it wouldn't surprise me if Michigan has been working on a head coaching search in the background for a while, because supposedly the investigation for this has been going on for some time. So it wouldn't surprise me if in the shadows Michigan has been doing some kind of research into a new head coach. Players, I've selected a few players that I think are absolutely mandatory. Excuse me. Sorry, I'm still getting over my illness. There are certain players that I've selected that I think Michigan has to retain at all costs. And those are obviously Bryce Underwood. Excuse me, I'm having a coughing fit. Other than obviously retaining 5-star, number one recruit, true freshman phenom quarterback Bryce Underwood is, good Lord, my voice, is absolutely important. But there are other players that I think really need to be maintained. That's true freshman wide receiver phenom Andrew Marsh. Gotta have him. Redshirt freshman running back Jordan Marshall. Gotta have him. Another one on offense that people probably wouldn't think about is five-star redshirt. He's going to be a redshirt freshman next year. Tackle Andrew Babalola. Babalola, he tore his ACL in training camp, and he was very much fighting for the starting left tackle job, which ultimately I think went to Nathan Afobe. Don't quote me on that. I don't remember. So in all likelihood, he would have been our Michigan starting left tackle. All signs were pointing to that eventually being a thing. And he's highly regarded, so I think it's really important that Michigan retains him, because if you have your quarterback and your stalwart left tackle, you can build a core on offense around that. The last one I wrote out is defensive back Jair Hill. He's going to be an upperclassman, experienced defensive guy, been around, understands what the Michigan standard is. So it's one of those where I think Michigan's defense is very young. So you could talk about guys like Jimmy Rolder or Cole Sullivan. But I think Jair Hill is the one that you definitely got to maintain, just because if you have no good DBs, it's going to be hard to survive as a coach. Michigan coaches that I think the next staff should retain. Tony Alford. Tony Alford is Michigan's running backs coach, and I think he's been huge. He recruited Savion Hyder. He did great things with Jordan Marshall and Justice Haynes. Oh, I would have mentioned Justice Haynes in the players to be retained, but I think he's going to go pro, so I didn't mention him. But I think it's really important that Tony Alford is retained on the next staff, just because I think he'd be a good fit. Now, obviously, looking forward, Michigan's going to need a new head coach. So I've put together like 23 names, and I went and I collected any name I could think of that could possibly come up, and I'm going to talk about each. I've broken them down into separate categories. I'm going to talk about each and every one of them and why you would talk about it. Should you talk about it? Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't work. So right off the top names that are outside the Michigan orbit. These are guys who are not, quote, Michigan men, who don't have any connection to the university, but are top names definitely to consider. Right off the top, Alabama head coach Kalen DeBoer. He should be candidate numero uno. Bama fans are upset with him because, they're not upholding the Nick Saban standard, blah, blah, blah. And these are rumors, but there are rumors that his family isn't super happy in Tuscaloosa, which doesn't surprise me. It's rural Alabama. So, Kalen DeBoer. Now, obviously, if Michigan lands Kalen DeBoer, that's massive. That is a massive, 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 massive get. But there are some things pulling against Michigan. Obviously, Bama is in the playoffs, and the transfer portal window opens during the playoffs. So if Bama makes a run deep into the playoffs, which they're going to because they won the SEC championship, so they got to bye. So if they don't lose their game, it could be very difficult for Michigan to sign him and have him come and put a staff together before the transfer portal window opens, because the football calendar is so stupid. For the next 20 seconds, earmuffs, I'm going to cuss for a bit. The college football calendar is fucking retarded. All right, that's it. I'm done swearing. There's just stupid name. It's just stupid how certain things which, in the NFL happen after the season's done just happen in the middle of the season. Either way, that's beside the point. So, Kalen DeBoer would be top tier, S tier, numero uno candidate. But there are other names. So, another name you obviously throw out is Dan Lanning, the head coach at Oregon. Now, I don't think this is happening because I think Oregon's Nike money will outbid any dollar amount that Michigan can afford. And I think he's built a real winner. And, you could make the argument, what is there at Oregon that he doesn't have that, he could have at Michigan? And I think Oregon's resources are pretty sizable. So I don't think he's coming. But obviously, you land him, that's huge. He built an instant winner at Oregon. He turned Oregon into an SEC team. They play that style of ball. They recruit incredibly well. So obviously, Dan Lanning. Next is Missouri head coach Eli Drinkwitz. Eli Drinkwitz is a great coach. He recruits well above Mizzou's weight class, so to speak. He runs a run-first system, which would very much fit in with the Michigan culture of, smash mouth football, blah, blah, blah. I think he'd be a great hire. He's given Ohio State fits in bowl games before. The only drawback I can think of for him is he signed a contract extension with Mizzou a couple of weeks ago. So you would have to buy out whatever his contract is. Now, it could be argued Michigan could do that. Michigan's got massive donors, and they could easily afford to just buy out anybody. But it is an obstacle. The next name would be Clark Lee, who's the head coach at Vanderbilt. Similar situation. Punches way above Vanderbilt's weight class. He's built Vanderbilt. I mean, they had their best season ever this year. They should have made the playoffs, in my opinion. They didn't. They went 10-2. They recruit way. I mean, they just flipped a 5-star QB. They just, they punch way above their weight class. But he signed a big extension, supposedly. Now, Vanderbilt is a private university, so we don't know what the buyout number is for Clark Lee, but Michigan would have to buy him out. I think any of those top four would be great hires because, Clark Lee, what Clark Lee has done at Vanderbilt cannot be understated. Vanderbilt has never been good in my lifetime. Yeah, they were okay under James Franklin, where they won like 7 games, and that was enough to get Franklin the head coaching job at Penn State. 7 games. They won 10. They were in the playoff hunt to the bitter end under Clark Lee. Their quarterback, Diego Pavia, in my opinion, is going to finish second in the Heisman voting. That's how good Vanderbilt was this year. So I think that'd be a massive hire, but I think the buyout might prove to be an obstacle. Next one you can think about is Arizona State head coach Kenny Dillingham. Now, for Kenny Dillingham, he got Arizona State all the way into the playoffs last year, and they were a whiskers chance from beating Texas, and which would have been huge. They won the Big 12. They had some issues this year just because of injuries at the quarterback position, so they kind of fell short of expectations this year. I'm pretty sure I had predicted them winning the Big 12 again, but great coach, runs a very he has Marcus Arroyo as his offensive coordinator, and I for those of you who will remember, I think I was doing my podcast back then. No, I wasn't. That was before my podcast. Wow. So that was right before I started my podcast. Yeah, I wanted Marcus Arroyo poached from Arizona State to become Michigan's offensive coordinator last year before Michigan hired Chip Lindsey. So he's great. Now, the problems are he's from Phoenix. He went to Arizona State. He's an alum. He's like the Jim Harbaugh of Arizona State. So getting him to leave would be really hard. You could do it. Obviously you could do it because you're never going to be able to reach the heights that Michigan can reach with the resources Michigan has. Just being honest. It's one of these things where there's a definite ceiling to what Arizona State's potential is on any given year. But he might just say, no, I want to stay at Arizona State. These things, home is where the heart is, blah, blah, blah. The final name in the top names outside the Michigan orbit, I have is Jeff Brom, the head coach of Louisville. Now he played for Louisville. He's coaching at his alma mater. He's the favorite son. He's the Jim Harbaugh of Louisville. But I saw what he did at Purdue. He took Purdue, the Boilermakers, who were like the second worst program in the history of the Big Ten, to the Big Ten championship. And that Purdue squad in 2022, they gave Michigan all Michigan could handle. Michigan won the game by a couple of scores, but that game, they were scrappy. That was a good team. And in a 12-team playoff, they might have gone. You never know. I think Brom is a great coach. I think he would probably be my second choice, to be honest. It would probably be Kalen DeBoer and then Jeff Brom, 1, 2, and the realistic top candidates. But it might be really tough to get him to leave Louisville, much like Kenny Dillingham. All right, other Power 4 level names to consider. Bryant Haynes. He is the defensive coordinator for the Indiana Hoosiers. I know he's only a DC, and Michigan probably wants an experienced head coach. But what he's been able to do at Indiana with their DC, Cignetti swears up and down about Haynes, so he's definitely a name to keep track of. Other names to consider: Jed Fish. He was Jim Harbaugh's offensive coordinator at Michigan in 2015 before leaving to take a job elsewhere. He's the current head coach at the Washington Huskies. Now, there are rumors that he's not super happy at Washington, and things have been so-so. And I'll be honest, Fish is a decent coach, but I would be pretty disappointed if he was the next head coach of the Michigan Wolverines, just because I think Michigan can swing for a higher, quote, tax bracket, end quote, than that. But he's definitely someone you gotta, he's a name that's gonna come up. I'm gonna make sure I put all these names out here so the names that you're gonna hear. That way you know who they are, and all that. The next name in the other, Power 4 level names is Ed Orgeron. Ed Orgeron was the interim head coach at USC. I thought he should have gotten that job after they fired, was that Lane Kiffin that they fired? Or Sark, or, it was several head coaches ago. But I thought he should have gotten that job, and instead he got the LSU job. Him and Jamar Chase, and Justin Jefferson and Joe Burrow, they won a national championship in 2019 at LSU, and then he got fired because, results, SEC, couldn't live up to Nick Saban, yada, yada, yada. He has been out of coaching for a while. He's a pretty solid head coach. He's definitely Louisiana through and through, so I don't know how he would really jive with the Michigan Midwest mindset. But he was beloved by his players in Southern Cal and at LSU. And, they say he's a real player's coach. And we've seen him win a national championship at LSU. We saw what he was able to do with Joe Burrow. So, with a quarterback like Bryce Underwood, what heights can a guy like him make? All right. Moving on to the next category, I got 2 group of 6 names. Now, it's not really the group of 5 anymore. It's more like the group of 6 because the Pac-12 is definitely a G6 team, a G6 conference. So 2 names I set aside. First name is a guy I really like. I would have been enthused if Michigan State had hired this guy because I think he's a great coach. Jason Eck. Now, y'all have heard me talk up Jason Eck before. I really like Jason Eck. He's the head coach of the New Mexico Lobos. His team was very well coached when they played Michigan. He's a great coach. He's been a steady climber. He's won championships at lower levels. Teams play really physical. They didn't make a lot of mistakes. Very disciplined teams. But he's been at the group of 6 level for like 1 year, 2 years. So he's a name to watch out for, but I don't think he's realistic at all. Now, the last group of 6 name I really thought of was Tony Annese. Tony Annese is a guy who's currently coaching Fresno State. There are those who say he's the next Curt Cignetti. The problem is he is like 65 years old. He's a little older. He's never coached at the Michigan level, so you worry about, Brady Hoke was a great group of 5 coach, but he couldn't hack it at the Michigan level. So you worry about those kind of things, but he is a winner at the group of 6 level. So the next several names I'm going to talk about are names. We're going to talk about some NFL names that you could consider, and then we're going to talk about some guys who not happening, but you got to talk about it. And then there's not happening at all. And then I'm going to finish off with some names that are in Michigan's orbit that you might, as Michigan fans, get tossed around. So NFL names: Joe Brady. He was Joe Burrow's offensive coordinator at LSU. That offense was disgusting. I mean, it had Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow, and it was just, bomb show at LSU. It was amazing. It was an incredible. I loved that LSU team. That was great. One of the best teams I've ever watched. He's been the offensive coordinator for the Buffalo Bills for a while. We've all seen the heights that Josh Allen has reached with Joe Brady as his offensive coordinator. So, after Daboll left after his first couple of years. So, there is that whole thing. Do I realistically think Joe Brady leaves the NFL for college? No, but I wouldn't be surprised if he did. He's definitely a name to talk about because he's an experienced NFL QB coach, offensive coordinator who's had success at the college level. He has recruited. He came from the college ranks. But it's hard for me to believe that he'll come down, take on 7,000 times the responsibility for a lot more pay. But, the college football calendar is a mess. Other names to consider, Brian Daboll. So Brian Daboll, he was in the college ranks briefly. He coached with Nick Saban once upon a time. He was the New York Giants head coach for like 6 years, and they never had success. They went to one playoff game, one playoff. They beat the Vikings that year, who I think had Kirk Cousins, and they had Danny Dimes. Then they paid him like $40 million, and it just went south, and they fired him this year. I think Brian Daboll's a good coach. He's unemployed right now. He has connections to the Pennsylvania area, so he kind of understands the Midwest-ish kind of vibe. As NFL names go that are realistic, I think he would probably be my top choice, just because he has been a head coach. He coached for Saban. So, yeah, but do I think that's going to happen? Maybe, maybe not. The last of these NFL names that are, that are outside of Michigan's orbit, John Harbaugh. You could make an argument that John Harbaugh is inside Michigan's orbit because his father coached at Michigan, his brother coached for Michigan, blah, blah, blah. But I think this only happens if Michigan is willing to wait and the Ravens miss the playoffs. If the Ravens miss the playoffs or they get bounced again in the wild card round or in their first game or whatever, maybe you see this come, but he's older. He's in his 60s. You probably want someone younger who's going to be around for a while, who's coached at the college level, more than less than 30 years ago or whatever. But he's definitely a name that's going to come up. I don't think this one happens at all. And you can say the same thing about what's his name? Mike Tomlin, who's the head coach of the Steelers, because they might fire him if the Steelers miss the playoffs. That's not happening. But those are definitely names that might come up. The next category I have are not happening, but you got to talk about it. Lincoln Riley. Lincoln Riley's a big name. He's someone who's definitely going to come up, but his teams are soft as pudding. They don't run the ball well. They don't play defense well. They're always sloppy and undisciplined. And if you asked me, if he left for another job, USC fans would be happy to see him go. So I just don't think that's happening. The next name, and then this is going to break a lot of people's hearts. It's possible. I'll say this. This is possible, but it's not happening. Curt Cignetti. He signed an extension with Indiana. There's no way they're going to let the best coach they've ever had leave. It's not happening. They will pay whatever money that they will mortgage the future of the university itself to keep their hands on him. So Cignetti is not leaving. I'm sorry, guys. He's not going anywhere. Even though I would be ecstatic if Michigan got cursing today because, look what he has done with Fernando Mendoza. Fernando Mendoza was a solid QB at Cal, but he was not a Heisman quality quarterback. And suddenly, he's going to win the Heisman Trophy in like a week. He's the front runner. Yeah, he won. And, Indiana is the 1 seed in the playoffs. It's huge. So, yeah, I would love Cignetti to come, but he's not coming. That's not happening. Other names that aren't happening, but you got to talk about it. Another name you're going to hear, John Gruden, former NFL coach, won Super Bowls. He coached the Buccaneers, Tampa Bay in the NFL. He coached the Raiders in the NFL. He's a guy who apparently is enthusiastic about coming back to coaching in some capacity. But I would caution, we've seen this before with, Bill Belichick. That's not really working out. And the guy who was coaching Arizona State before, Kenny Dillingham, he was an NFL guy. That didn't work out. So I caution against, long-time NFL guys bringing an NFL mindset to college and, trusting the portal, because you can't build a team through the portal. You have to build a team via high school, and then you supplement in the portal. So that's not happening, but he's a name that's definitely going to come up. And the last of the not happening, but you got to talk about it, are Marcus Freeman, the head coach of the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. He's a great coach. I'd argue one of the top 3 coaches in college football. But he coached for Jim Tressel at Ohio State. He's not a fan of Michigan. There's no way he comes. Just ain't happening. Now, if he came, I'd be ecstatic. Marcus Freeman, what he's doing at Notre Dame is, it warrants mentioning how good he is as a coach, but it's not happening. The next several names aren't happening at all. Just not even happening. Don't even mention it. Brian Kelly. I have already heard from sources that Michigan is not even considering him. I've seen reports that he is not, Michigan is conducting a search, and a name that will definitely not come up is Brian Kelly. And I'm thinking, thank God. I just don't want him, any part of him. I mean, freaking Rich Rodriguez and Brady Hoke could beat him. He's a good coach, but he's not, his time has passed. Let's put it that way. The next name that, not happening, shouldn't even mention it, but some will because people are dumb. Urban Meyer. He hates Michigan, from Ohio, coached Ohio State, not happening. He hates NIL. There's a million reasons why that won't happen, but someone will mention, oh, they should go get Urban Meyer. Bo Schembechler was a Buckeye. It can work. No. No. So, no Urban Meyer. And the last name that's not happening at all, Jesse Minter. There are a lot out of there. I met several members of my family love Jesse Minter. I love Jesse Minter. His defenses were great, but there are a multitude of reasons why he's not coming. One, he's the defensive coordinator of the LA Chargers, and he's probably going to be a head coach at the NFL level next year. It's just not happening, folks. But even if it was possible, he has a 1-year show cause with the NCAA for illegal communications with recruits during a dead period over the whole Burgergate thing that doesn't stop until April. So you couldn't even get him on campus to build a staff really until April. I mean, you could hire him as like beverage coordinator, but he couldn't actually be the head coach until after spring training, after winter conditioning. There's no way. That's not happening. Now, maybe if he doesn't work out as an NFL head coach 7 years from now, maybe you hire him. But it ain't happening this time. It's not happening this time. Now, I've got only 3 more names to mention, and this is a final category. These are names that are in Michigan's orbit. 2 names you would really think of, and 1 name you wouldn't. The first name is the LA Chargers special teams coach, Jay Harbaugh. Jay Harbaugh would, in my opinion, he's probably my 3rd choice of, like, if I was ranking all of my choices, it would probably be Kalen DeBoer, Jeff Brom, Jay Harbaugh, because Jay Harbaugh was Michigan's safeties coach. He was the running backs coach. He was the tight ends coach. He was the special teams coordinator at some point during Harbaugh's tenure, and all 4 of those units were great under his leadership. So he's coached everywhere. He coached and recruit. He was an excellent recruiter at Michigan. He's a guy who's coached everywhere. I think he'd be a great college head coach. I would love him at Michigan. I don't think that happens just because I think he's going to stay in the NFL. Because most guys don't jump down a level, but maybe it happens. I mean, he was at Michigan for 9 years. Maybe it does. And I will admit, it would be kind of funny if it's like, you've heard of first Harbaugh, but what about second Harbaugh? But I don't, it is a name to think about, but I don't really think it's realistic. The next name is someone that no one's really talking about, but which I think is a shame because I think he absolutely should be a candidate, even though I don't think it's realistic. Is former Michigan national championship winning quarterback, former Super Bowl winning QB, current San Francisco 49ers quarterback coach Brian Griese. Brian Griese is a great quarterbacks coach. We've seen what he can do with, Mac Jones, Brock Purdy, several quarterbacks under Kyle Shanahan in San Francisco. I think he'd be a great coach. He loves Michigan, alum, won a championship. So I think he'd be a great hire, but I think he'd rather take an NFL offensive coordinator job before he would ever consider taking the head coaching job. Now, admittedly, I think he's a name you absolutely call if the other options don't work out. I think he's definitely a name to consider. Now, the last name I'm going to mention is kind of off the wall, but LA Chargers defensive line coach Mike Elston. Now, maybe people will recognize that name, maybe they won't. For those of you who don't, he was the former Notre Dame defensive line coach under Brian Kelly, and then he was poached by Harbaugh, and he was Harbaugh's D-line coach at Michigan 21, 22, 23. So guys like Aiden Hutchinson, Mason Graham, Derek Moore, Kenneth Grant, Mozzie Smith, all of those guys were coached by Mike Elston. He was a great D-line coach. I think he'd be a great defensive coordinator at the NFL and the college level. He's definitely someone to consider, coming from the NFL level. I think he has a Michigan connection, but he's not a Michigan man, so to speak. But I think he's definitely a name that you won't hear his name mentioned, but an off-the-wall name that I kind of thought of. After all of those 23 names, who do I think is the least likely top candidate? I think Kalen DeBoer is going to be the top candidate. I've already seen reports that he's the top candidate. Excuse me. If I had to guess, I don't think Michigan lands Kalen DeBoer. But I would love that, to be honest with you. I don't honestly, it's too early to tell who Michigan's next head coach is. Now, I would love if Michigan could tell us by Friday, because then I could do another episode about it on next Monday. But we'll just, we'll have to see. Now, for those of you who don't like Michigan Athletic Director Ward Manuel, I know there are several members of my family don't like him at all. Just be aware, when Michigan needed a new men's hockey coach, he hired a great hire. Michigan's men's hockey is doing great. When Michigan had to get rid of Juwan Howard, he went out and hired Dusty May, and Dusty May has Michigan's basketball team as the best basketball team in the country. In the Ken Pop era, Michigan has the fifth best team ever right now in Ken Pop rating. The Michigan's Ken Pop is 37.9 or whatever. It's an analytics, tabulation method that ranks teams based on efficiency and all these other metrics. But anyway, I have full faith in Ward Manuel to come up with a hire that's going to put Michigan back where it is, because we've seen he's willing to spend the money on good coaches. He's willing to poach teams, poach from teams that you wouldn't think about. He has an eye for talent. There are those who believe he ran Harbaugh out of town, but that's just not true. Harbaugh was never staying at Michigan. Harbaugh wanted to go to the NFL. He got his chip, and now he's gone. And it had nothing to do with Ward Manuel. I mean, Michigan stuck up for Jim Harbaugh, even though they had to suspend him because you have to suspend a coach in that situation. But Michigan stuck up for Jim Harbaugh because there are those who wanted Harbaugh gone mid-season. There were those in the NCAA who were like, he should be gone now for this. But Ward Manuel stuck up for Jim Harbaugh. I will go to my grave thinking that. I like him as the athletic director. So I have full faith that Michigan is going to hire a quality head coach that's going to have Michigan back on top. And here's the last thing I'm going to say about this topic right now. Sherrone Moore was necessary. He was an idiot. I mean, what an idiot. How do you have an inappropriate relationship with a college staffer, period, when you're a married man with kids? But, even beyond that, if you're going to do that, how do you not use protection? 2, it's everywhere. 3, you threw away your coaching career. You were the head coach of one of the premier college football destinations, and you messed it up. How do you do that? Come on, Sherrone. Having said all that, Sherrone Moore was necessary. So you have to look at where Michigan was when Jim Harbaugh left. It was late in the head coaching carousel. The portal had already been open a while. There was the cloud of NCAA sanctions hanging over Michigan's head. No one knew how that was going to turn out. So Michigan promoting from within and promoting Sherrone Moore, it was what Michigan had to do at the time. I once saw someone refer to Kalen DeBoer as, Kalen DeBoer has a tough time at Alabama because you don't want to be the man following the man. You don't want to be the guy following Bear Bryant. You don't want to be the guy directly following Nick Saban or, Bobby Bowden or any of these all-time great head coaches. But somebody's got to be the first man through the brick wall. And the first man through the brick wall always gets bloody. So Sherrone Moore finishes, if you count his win as an interim head coach, he finished, what would that be? That would be 8 plus 9 is 17, right? Yes, 17. If you count his the games that he coached for Jim Harbaugh while Harbaugh was suspended, oh man, he had a final total cumulative record of 22 and 22-8 if you count his time as interim head coach. If you don't count those games, his head coaching record, oh wait, no, there were 2 games where it would have been 20-8 if you counted his cumulative record. Now, if you don't count his interim stuff, his final record is 16-8 or something like that. 16, 15-8, somewhere in there. I think officially it's 16-8. It's confusing because there were suspensions and interim work, and it's so dumb. But he finished the season. We're going to just go with 16-8 is his final coaching tally in 2 years. He finished with a 2-1 record over over Ohio State. He finished 2-0 against Michigan State. He oversaw 3 Joe Moore award-winning O-lines. He helped Michigan win a He helped Michigan win a national championship, 3 Big Ten titles. There are those who would want to cast him out, and you should judge him harshly for his behavior off the field. It's inexcusable. But there will always be a part of me that is thankful for Sherrone Moore, because what he helped Michigan accomplish cannot be understated. Michigan, there was a time in my life where I thought Michigan was never going to beat Ohio State again, and never going to win a Big Ten championship, and never win an Ohio State. I thought I was going to be my father's age before I saw Michigan win a championship. But Michigan won one thanks to him and Jim Harbaugh and all of those guys. And with Sherrone Moore leaving and this staff leaving, that whenever the next coach comes in, that is going to basically put a final final end note, a period on the Jim Harbaugh era. 2015 to 2025, really. That was a long time, and a lot of good years, couple of bad years, but a lot of great years. And I think with Sherrone Moore gone, that you kind of turning the page. You're now officially post Jim Harbaugh. Really, you're not trying to uphold the Harbaugh standard. Michigan is going to become something else. Maybe Michigan embraces a more modern style of construction, where of roster construction and offense, where you can be physical and you can play great defense, but you can also throw the ball. You don't have to just not throw because you want to run the ball. So maybe Michigan can use this chance to pivot towards something more sustainable and get a coach that we don't have to worry about, because the thing is, if Sherrone Moore quit, do you really think teams like Ole Miss, LSU were going to hire him? No. Michigan should have a head coach that other teams want to poach, in my opinion. So hopefully Michigan can take this opportunity to get one of those A-listers, one of those S-tier coaches who's the best of the best. Because I think Michigan deserves to, Michigan's rightful place in college football is at the top, fighting it out with Ohio State and Bama and Georgia and all these teams that win championships. That's what Michigan should be. Michigan should not be a team that wins a championship every 25 years. I don't want Michigan to be that. Now, you can argue maybe that is what Michigan has been, but I think Michigan can be more than that. Michigan's willingness to pay Bryce Underwood the money they're paying him shows that Michigan is willing to be more. So, with the exit of Sherrone Moore, cheers to new beginnings. Here's to what the future can hold for Michigan. All right, for those of you listening on podcasts, Apple Podcasts and everywhere else that podcasts are available, thank you. Spread the word, help the podcast grow. For those of you watching on YouTube, like, comment, subscribe. Please feed the algorithm. Tell your friends and family. Hit the bell icon to get notifications. Thank you all, so we can keep this thing going. If there's more news about this, I will inform you on next Monday's show. So, my name is H. James K. Thank y'all for tuning in. Until next time.